At my mother's funeral, my husband yanked a tiny blue book from my hands and hurled it into the trash. Let it rot with her, he growled, eyes burning. People turned. The imam paused. A rose fell from my hand onto the cold floor.
Hi.
My name is Mallory. I'm 33, and I buried my mother last Thursday. She raised me alone, no father, no help, just tips from a greasy diner and that stubborn little savings book she never let out of sight. She'd say, "This isn't just money, baby. This is years of saying no to myself, so I could say yes to you one day." After the final prayer, I reached into her coat and felt it. That book. Still there. Still full. I looked at it like it was her last whisper. But Daniel, my husband, didn't see it that way. He saw an inconvenience. A threat. A mess. And before I could blink, he ripped it from my hands and flung it into the funeral trash bin.
Loud.
Deliberate. I said nothing. I walked over. I reached in. The moment I opened it, my hand started to shake. And then I saw the final entry. It wasn't just money. It was instructions. My mother, Ellen May Carter, never trusted banks. But oddly enough, she trusted that little blue savings book more than any institution. And somehow she was right. Inside were handwritten deposits, neatly logged, each one matched by official stamps. 30 years of her life, waitress shifts, overtime tips, extra cash from selling jam jars at the farmer's market. All of it saved, quietly, with one goal in mind: me. When I told Daniel about the book early in our marriage, his reaction was lukewarm. "Cute," he'd said, without looking up from his phone. I thought it was just his tone. It wasn't. The closer my mom got to retirement, the more detached Daniel became. He resented how close we were. He'd say things like, "You're not her emotional crutch, Mallory. You're a wife now. Act like it." But when Mom was diagnosed with heart failure 2 years ago, she moved into our guest room. And that's when the tension thickened like smoke. Daniel started locking doors. Passive comments became cold commands. "She needs to go," he whispered one night. "She's draining you." But she wasn't. Not financially. Not emotionally. If anything, she was holding me up while he chipped away. And now she was gone. And I had just read the last line she ever wrote. It didn't say Mallory. It said, "For the girl who stayed gentle, even in fire."
Go now.
Finish what I started. And taped behind the last page was a key. The key was old, brass, taped tight to the last page. I stared at it while Daniel glared at me across the room filled with mourners and whispers. "What did you just pull out?" he hissed. I didn't answer. That night, silence lived between us like smoke. At dinner, he reached for the wine. I reached for answers. "Why did you throw it out, Daniel?" He didn't flinch. "Because your mother controlled you with that stupid book." I didn't marry into debt. She wasn't in debt. She was trying to leave me something. He scoffed, swirling his glass.
"She's gone."
"Stop clinging to scraps. You're not a child." That word, scraps, burned deeper than I expected. Over the next few days, he became obsessed with the book. I caught him going through my purse. He demanded to see what was in the pages. I already looked. I lied. But I hadn't. That night, I waited until he fell asleep, then tiptoed to the garage and unlocked Mom's old trunk with a key. The metal creaked, and inside, I found something that made me stagger back.
Deeds.
Letters. A notarized trust document with my name, only my name, on the title to a small apartment complex in town. Fully paid off. And a letter. 3 words, "Don't tell him." 3 weeks later, Daniel's company threw their annual gala, a black tie affair at the Rivercrest Hotel. He begged me to come, for optics. Said it would look bad if I wasn't on his arm. So I wore black. Mom's locket under my collarbone. By then, I had already seen everything in that trunk: the real estate trust, the tenant contracts, the secondary account linked to the savings book with over $210,000 in deposits, all in my name. I hadn't told Daniel. I was still reading. Still learning what she'd done for me. That night, surrounded by donors and deals, Daniel leaned in and whispered, "You look nice." Maybe now we can talk about liquidating some of your mother's junk. I froze. You don't know, do you? He added, smirking. He pulled out his phone, opened an email. I contacted probate. That apartment complex? It's still going through her estate. With my name on the marriage certificate, I'll make sure it's not just yours. I stared at him, eyes wide. People around us were laughing, clinking glasses. Everyone sees you as this sweet, grieving daughter, he muttered. But soon, you'll be the ex-wife who tried to hide assets. And then he raised his glass in a toast, smiling, smug. In front of 100 people, I smiled back. I clinked and whispered, "You should have read the fine print." Because I already had. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. I sat at the edge of our bed, watching Daniel's silhouette breathe beside me. He had no idea that I'd already met with a lawyer. No idea that my mother had put everything in a living trust before she passed, airtight, irrevocable, and completely separate from her estate. That savings book he trashed? It wasn't sentimental junk. It was a breadcrumb trail, every deposit matched with a transaction in a quiet regional credit union under my name. She'd been preparing me for war I never saw coming. The next morning, I called her attorney, the same one listed on the trust. He'd been waiting for me. "Your mother planned this precisely," he said. "She wanted you protected. From everything. Including your husband." He gave me something else, a sealed envelope Mom had left with him. Inside was a hand-sketched map of the property's layout, a few cash deposit slips, and a sticky note that said,
"He will try to take."
"Let him try. You will already own."
I stared at it for a long time.
Then I pulled out my laptop. Daniel wanted a battle?
Fine.
But I wasn't walking into it unarmed. I filed paperwork, froze access to accounts, notified the tenants of updated ownership under my LLC. And then I waited, calmly, for Daniel to make the first mistake. He didn't disappoint. The mistake came on a Tuesday. Daniel forwarded a formal notice to my inbox. It was from his lawyer, claiming I was attempting to conceal jointly owned assets, meaning the apartment complex, and demanding I disclose all inheritances and recent acquisitions. I replied once. "Please confirm you're referring to trust #48MC, established prior to marriage and held solely in my legal name." Then I CC'd Mom's attorney, and the accountant, and the bank manager listed on the savings account. By Friday, his tone changed. He tried charm. "Let's just talk this out, Mal," he said over eggs he didn't cook. "No lawyers. No mess. I mean, it's all ours, right?" I looked him in the eye. "No, Daniel. It's not." He reached for my hand. "Don't do this." I pulled back. "You already did." The next morning, a sheriff knocked. He tried to file a temporary injunction, claiming I'd forged the trust documents. But the court had already verified the signatures. And the kicker? My mother had legally updated the documents after our wedding, specifically excluding Daniel by name. He stood on the porch, barefoot, speechless, watching the officer hand me the official validation. Sole ownership. No contest. No appeal. I closed the door gently and sent a final email to his lawyer. "Assets are secure. You can tell your client to start packing." Daniel didn't move out quietly. He slammed doors, made dramatic speeches, told anyone who'd listen that I was hiding money, robbing him blind, turning into my mother. But the more he raged, the smaller he seemed. His lawyer stopped responding after the trust documents were upheld a second time. There was no loophole, no marital claim, no leg to stand on. And worst of all, no money coming to him. The apartment complex? Already signed under my LLC. The tenants? Fully aware of the change. The bank? Locked tight with passwords and alerts on every access point. The only thing Daniel got was served. The final blow came during mediation. He walked in smirking, assuming I'd settle just to be done. That I'd want peace. I handed the mediator a folder. Inside, screenshots of his secret bank withdrawals, his request to liquidate the property behind my wife's back, and a signed confession email he'd foolishly sent to a friend. "Once that old woman croaks, I'm cashing in. She owes us anyway. The mediator read it, looked at him. Daniel's face drained of color.
He tried to speak.
I stood. This isn't revenge, I said. This is respect. For a woman who deserved better, and for the version of me who used to shrink to keep you calm. I left the folder on the table, walked out, and didn't look back. A month later, I stood in the middle of the apartment complex's courtyard. Spring was just starting to show. Sunlight filtered through the oak trees my mother once pointed at in an old photo. I had the trust renamed after her, the Ellen May Foundation. Half of the rental income now went into scholarships for single mothers going back to school. Daniel? He tried to smear me online. Claimed I manipulated an old woman into giving me property. But no one listened, especially after I published one quiet post. A photo of my mother and me standing in front of the building 5 years ago. She held the keys in her hand. Caption: she planned everything. I just followed the map. He went silent after that. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was the cease and desist I had delivered through my attorney. A week later, the same bank manager who'd whispered, "Call the police," when I first brought in the savings book, he handed me a framed certificate.
She believed in you, he said.
Even when he didn't. That night, I finally sat on the floor of my mother's old room. I opened the last page of the savings book once more. There, faded but visible, was one final handwritten line. Your silence is power. Your peace is proof. I closed the book, stood up, and walked out of that room, free,